Thank you so much, Stephen. Hello, everybody. It's fantastic to be here with you all to talk about something that is very close to my heart, which is well-being. And hopefully over the next 10 minutes, which is the first kind of introduction of a few of the concepts that I'll speak to, it'll also have a bit of a global understanding of why really this potentially is the moment for us to remake and reimagine what learning can be for young people, but also for all of us. Be we educators, leaders, people working outside the education ecosystem, really at all different parts. As Stephen said, here is the wonderful country of Australia. It is my home. I'm in that big purple state called South Australia right now. And as I went through school, this was what I recognized as Australia, our states and territories. And it really only took for me to be about 18 years old when I saw for the first time this map. Now this map is also Australia, but it looks quite different because this map is a map of all of the First Nations countries that exist within Australia, an enormous diversity, as you can all see there. And so I want to begin before moving on by using a beautiful protocol that we have here in Australia. It's called an Acknowledgement of Country. Because right now I am in southern Adelaide, which is a city, but I'm also on Kaurna country. And so I'd like to attempt Kaurna, which is the local language here. Ngadlu tampenti yalaka ngadlu Kaurna yatanka iparinti, ngadlu tampenti panaku tuila yatanka. And that's an acknowledgement of country in Kaurna, which just means I acknowledge the country that I'm on right now has been inhabited for tens of thousands of years here in Australia. And there's an enormous wisdom that comes from stopping and listening to the country, but also to Indigenous peoples all over the world. Crises disrupt, clearly, but they also reveal. And right now, I don't know about how you feel, but certainly there is this impending doom, this increased global anxiety about COVID-19 and what it actually means. And so before we do anything else, I just want you to stop for a moment, even if you're kind of walking, wherever you happen to be on our planet, and just take a deep breath in for 5 seconds and release for 5 seconds. It's amazing with everything that's happening right now, how stuck we can get into our heads and how it's really important, not least of all because we're facing a respiratory virus, that we use our breath to be able to engage some of the powerful mindfulness and also well-being mechanisms that it enables us. Here's where I want to start. I want to zoom out to the highest level possible. And this, as you would well see, is a video. And it's the world GDP by country in billions of US dollars. And so what we're seeing here is economic growth. Now, GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. And you can see here, since 1967, which is where this particular visual starts, the world has experienced really significant economic growth. Now, by and large, that's been a very positive thing for most of the world. We have fewer people living in extreme poverty than ever before, for example. We have many countries that have been able to develop a significant middle class, that have seen entire communities lifted out of poverty. However, it's also created an enormous amount of issues as well as a byproduct of economic growth. And so one of the theses that I have that I want to pose to all of us today is, does this model still serve us? Does counting what we do and success as just growth in its kind of bluntest form in terms of GDP, is that what we want to continue to do? So when we think about the way that the world has been shifting over the last, couple of decades, with the rise of exponential technologies, with the computational era, we have seen a really significant disruption in the job landscape. We have seen a significant change. You can see the emerging roles here from some research by the World Economic Forum, the Future of Jobs report. We can see there are declining roles and there are also emerging roles. And so we are seeing really significant macro disruptions into what employment is. So those are the roles. What about the skills that underpin them? the skills that we focus on as educators through our work, but also that policymakers focus on in terms of trying to set up societies to be successful. Well, you can see the growing skills and the declining skills. Anything that is routine, be it manual or cognitive, is actually being automated by the converging technologies and the drive of the law of accelerating returns in particular. So you can get the idea of analytical thinking, active learning, creativity, critical thinking analysis, complex problem solving, emotional intelligence. These are, we know, the growing skills that from the economic standpoint of jobs, employers are actually asking for. And these are the growth areas. Here's the problem from down under here in Australia, for those of you overseas, is that even in our country, it's incredibly difficult to get into full-time employment. So at 25 years old, here in Australia, even though 2/3 of 25-year-olds hold a post-school qualification, either an apprenticeship or a university degree, 50% are not working full-time. And of course, that's only going to become more the case with the impending economic challenges that all of us are going to face globally. So that's just the economic paradigm. This graph, I think, is as important, if not more important, because the World Health Organization, which of course all of us now know about because of the global crisis, they have been showing that really, they've been predicting that the global burden of disease, the largest global burden, will actually be depression by 2030. Now, one of the concerns that I have is that because of physical distancing or social distancing, and because of the economic disruptions, we might actually get to that earlier, as we see this incredible rise in mental health and substance abuse disorders, as you can see here on this particular graph. And sadly, Australia is overrepresented in terms of the globe in that as well. So where to from here? Well, this is, I think, one of the most interesting things about the emerging economic theories that we see around the world. In my view, the old growth model is no longer fit for purpose. It's not just my view. I'm to far more qualified people like Kate Raworth, who wrote a great book called Donut Economics. We need to rethink what success is for a society. And so it's not just about growth. It's about how do we create, thriving or flourishing or well-being or wellness through every single part of our system design as societies and as education systems. So for example, this means not just measuring some of the things that are easy to measure and valuing them, but actually trying to measure the things that we value most. This is a wonderful model because it looks at overshoot and shortfall. It really tries to pick up the equity question that we have, but also the fact that we can't overshoot and that growth for the sake of growth will end up destroying the world at the same time. You can see climate change, air pollution, land conversion, freshwater biodiversity. There are a significant range of equal ceilings we are overshooting. So this is, I think, really important, to think about the biggest picture possible, because for our work in schools and in education systems, we need to think about what does success actually mean? What is a school for? What is a government for? What is a society for? These are the big questions we're seeing being asked all over the world. So the last thing I want to just talk about at this really high level, before we kind of look at, what are the interesting educational models that are emerging globally, is some, I think, really interesting policy work. Now, I'm a practitioner. I'm a school teacher by training. I was a school leader for a while. So policy for me, wasn't always the thing that excited me the most. But if I'm excited about any policy making right now, it is this idea of what would it look like if we had a frame for policy that focused on well-being and not on growth, not on GDP. Because even though we've got increasing GDP and we've had it for decades, we have more mental health crises, we have increasing inequality, we have all of these challenges. So how might we better focus on what success is for a country? And so I applaud the New Zealand government. And again, this is very new work, but you can see here they are taking these particular issues and really trying to create a well society, not just a rich society in terms of GDP, but one which is well. And so this, how on earth would you know? if your society is well? Well, we need to create new metrics and new measures. And this is the same for us in schools, which I'm sure we're going to cover quite a lot of this session, Stephen. You know, but I wanted to start at this level. We need to change what success means, what we conceive success as. And that really is the most powerful thing we can do as leaders in societies, is to say, here's what success has been measured as. We don't think that's fit for purpose anymore. So we need a new standard, a new framework, a living standards framework, because it won't serve us if we have, you know, enormous wealth inequality, or we have ecological collapse whilst we continue on our kind of growth obsession that we have. And I'll just leave you with, before I throw it back to you, Stephen, a wonderful provocation from Sir David Attenborough. And this is a bit unfair on economists, because I know some fantastic economists. But he says, anyone that thinks you can have infinite growth in a finite world is either a madman or an economist. And so the question for us is, how might we change what success means for us as a global community, for us as a nation state, for us as a local community, for us as a learning community at a school, and ultimately for us as an individual as well. And really focus on all of those different levels for us in terms of what success, and clearly in my view, that emerging conceptualization of success is more and more about collective well-being than it is about any type of competitive or traditional metric or measure that we've inherited from the past kind of conceptualization. So there's my starting point, Stephen. I hope that's okay to start at that level.
No, that was fantastic. I think we have to start at that level, because we have to get this global perspective on why we're at where we're at the moment, because then that flows all the way through. And I think that's a great question to be asking, first of all, to define success, because success as a term by itself suggests that someone wins and someone loses going through. And so that the definition and the redefinition of that is incredibly important.